Hello and welcome back to the channel, everyone. Today's Kickstarter Weekly will be covering the period of August 30th through September 5th. So we'll be talking about games that are completing their funding during that period. And I'll be talking about 6 different games today, some very, very cool, interesting games that I think you don't want to miss. After that, I will quickly talk about the 3 games that I personally backed from last video. And then after that, I only have 1 game that arrived this period and no games played. So it's going to be a quicker video that will focus much more on the currently running Kickstarters. So let's get things going, shall we? To start things off, our first game is Legend Academy, which will fund on August 30th. Now, Legend Academy had a minimum requested funding goal of $50,000. They're currently sitting at about $165,000, so that's about 3.5 times their minimum requested funding. This is a game that plays 1 to 4 players in about 45 minutes to 2.5 hours. I'm going to estimate the complexity of Legend Academy at medium light. It's possible it could push into the medium heavy a little bit, but for now we're going to say medium light. And the risk on this one is medium low. Now, Legend Academy is a competitive Euro with deck building and worker placement. Thematically, it's a fantasy themed game, and players will be playing different kinds of fantasy characters, but they won't necessarily be playing those characters in their own stories. They'll be taking them to the Legend Academy, where they'll be learning about other stories and fairy tales and taking tests on them. So that's kind of the hook of this game, is playing fairy tale characters, but playing them in other fairy tales and seeing how you apply certain fairy tale lessons in different ways. Now, the game is designed by Daniel Aronson and Nick Tompkins, but strangely enough, although Nick Tompkins has a designer credit on the Kickstarter page, he's not listed in Board Game Geek, and he's not listed on any of their other games. So I'm not sure what kind of deal they have going on, where perhaps Daniel Aronson has decided to be sort of the face of the design team to the world and on Board Game Geek. Maybe it's a similar thing to the Coen brothers, where even though they direct their movies together, Joel Coen has always had pretty much sole directing credit. But there we are. So even though Nick Tompkins is listed on the page as being a co-designer, I'm not going to talk about him here. We're just going to talk about Daniel Aronson. And they seem to work on everything together. They're part of a team. They are El Dorado Games, so you can just assume that Nick is working on everything as well. But Daniel Aronson previously has designed The Age of Atlantis, Capone, The Business of Prohibition, and The Island of El Dorado. And the artist on this is Justin Spice. The only game that he's worked on previously is Windward, which happens to be another game published by El Dorado Games. And the publisher here, El Dorado Games, has previously published The Age of Atlantis, The Island of El Dorado, and Windward. Now, part of what attracts me personally to this game is, even though it looks cool, and they're doing kind of fun things with the fantasy characters and the different storybooks that you might be playing in a game, oftentimes when games like this crowdfund, they have a tendency to take on a lot of bloat. And before the campaign is over, you find yourself trying to make a decision on whether or not you're going to also add on the 5 different expansions, and you're watching the price tag soar from a $75 or $100 game into the hundreds of dollars. And I know for me personally, I'm a completist, so I like to back everything. So if I find that I'm not backing the project in full, I often find myself not really wanting to back the project at all and trying to make this decision on whether I'm going to spend more money than I want to on a huge version of the game, an amount that I'm comfortable with on a version of the game that I don't really want because it doesn't have all the stuff, or just deciding to let that one go, give it up, and not back at all. Because guess what? In this crowdfunding campaign, there's only 1 pledge level, and it's not a break the bank pledge level, and you're going to get everything there is to get through this pledge level. And that is for $69, the Legend Academy Deluxe Edition. So if this game looks interesting to you, you can go out, you can pledge it without breaking the bank. Now, El Dorado Games is shooting to deliver this one in September of 2022, but there's a huge global pandemic that's still going on right now. And partly because of that, there are worldwide shipping backups So hopefully the game will get delivered in September 2022, but everyone should just be aware that at this point there are going to be backups affecting all kinds of shipping, including crowdfunding campaigns, probably for at least the next year. So we'll see how that shakes out. But hopefully by September 2022, things will start to be resolving themselves enough that El Dorado Games can actually deliver on time. But September 2022 is what they're shooting for. Also, with this game and any of the other games that I'm going to be talking about, if anything that I say grabs you and you want to learn more about the game or the crowdfunding campaign, or you just want to go pledge it, just go down into the notes. I have everything listed there along with links that go right to the campaign, so you can just click on it and it'll send you there. And I should note, the link is going to be correct, but in case you're just going there on your own, Legend Academy is not on Kickstarter, it is on Gamefound, so that is where you need to go to back it. There's another game today that is also on Gamefound, and I will mention that when we get there. But Legend Academy is on Gamefound. It's the first of 2 games on Gamefound today in this list. Following Legend Academy, on August 31st, Arydia, The Paths We Fear to Tread is also funding. Now this game had a huge minimum requested funding goal. It was $720,000. Setting a goal like that, I think, is intimidating, or it would be to me, just because that's a high goal to reach to get there. But the designer of this does have a game that I think was very, very successful on crowdfunding before, which is Zia Legends of Adrift System. And this campaign is doing very well. They're currently sitting at about 1.1 million, or about 1.5 times that minimum requested funding goal. Now, this is a game for 1 to 4 players. It should play in about 1 to 2 hours. This one is definitely going to be in the medium-heavy range. And I'm going to put the risk on this one at medium-high. And the reason for that is, while I actually have a lot of faith in the designer and the publisher, it is kind of a one-man operation. And he's done Zia Legends of Adrift System previously. He's done 2 follow-up campaigns to that for kind of smaller expansions. And I think he did 1 other Kickstarter in the meantime. But it's kind of a one-man operation, and this is a big game, and it's got miniatures and all that stuff. There are just more ways for it to go wrong when it's a kind of a huge game with a huge production, and it's kind of falling on one person. But keep in mind, Isaac Childress is very much a one-man operation with Frosthaven and Gloomhaven, and he's done that very, very well. And judging from the past, it seems like Cody Miller has done a fantastic job with Zia Legends of Adrift System, so I'm not actually worried, but I do feel the need to class it as medium-high, just because there's a risk out there. But I think the Gloomhaven comparison is a really apt one for this, because the game is a big game with a lot going on and a lot in the box, and I think people should approach this looking at this, even though it plays differently and it's not exactly the same thing as Gloomhaven, but as a Gloomhaven type experience. Now, it's a little different because Gloomhaven is very much kind of a scripted experience. Occasionally you can make different choices in terms of what you're going to do in Gloomhaven when you're answering questions and kind of where you want to go next for the scenario, but in general, Gloomhaven is kind of on rails. This is a much more open world experience. It is campaign based, it is cooperative, and it also has pre-painted miniatures, which I think is awesome. As someone who loves the board gaming hobby and obviously is making videos now, I just don't have time to take on another hobby like miniature painter. So I like miniatures, but let's face it, a lot of times they look pretty drab on the table when they're just gray. So when games give me the ability to get pre-painted miniatures, I'm usually pretty excited. Sometimes that's tempered because they can be expensive as well. But when they're not, when it's kind of all baked in and it's a respectable price, I get very excited because I can play a miniatures game with cool painted minis and I don't have to go through the whole process of painting them myself. So Arydia is open world, it's campaign based, it's cooperative. There's just a lot of stuff that you're going to be exploring and doing in this game. Now, the designer here is Cody Miller. I've mentioned before, this is kind of a one-man operation. The 2 games that he's really published before are Tavarua and Zia Legends of Adrift System. Now, there are 5 listed artists on this. First up is Philip Ack, who previously has worked on Medieval Realms, Taxidermy, and Wishland. Next on the list are 2 artists who always work together. They're known as Mr. Cuddington. They are also husband and wife. The first half of this pair is Lena Cassette. The second half is David Forrest. So the games that they've worked on together include Brass Birmingham, Brass Lancashire, Charterstone, Santorini, and Steampunk Rally. The last two artists on this list are Kirk Hamilton and Tess Anderson, and for both of them, this is their first published game, so congratulations. And finally, Arydia is being published by Far Off Games. This is Cody Miller's game company, and so previously they've published his two games, Tavarua and Zia Legends of a Drift System. Now, there aren't too many pledge levels on this, despite it being this big, expansive game, because again, they've kind of baked everything into the base game. So, for $165, you're going to get the base game. And again, this is a large game that has everything baked into it. So think again of like Gloomhaven or something on that level. They do have one other pledge level, and that is to include a smaller expansion called Epic Hunt. And it doesn't really seem to be that critical. In fact, they even say on the Kickstarter page, this is not that critical an expansion. You don't need it. Don't get it. I think they're just trying to combat FOMO and, not have people freak out saying like, oh, I have to get this. If you do want that little Epic Hunt mini expansion, you want to pledge at the $190 level. That will include the base game plus Epic Hunt. And this is going to be a limited thing. It's only going to be available through this Kickstarter. So I think it's really just being done for simplicity's sake. So if backers want to back a little bit extra and help the designer, they can do that, kick in a little bit of money, and they'll get this extra thing that does have gameplay value, but it's not essential. But when they go to retail, everything else will be included. There won't be a lot of complicated decisions in terms of what goes to retail and what doesn't. But the Epic Hunt will not. It will not go to retail. It will not be published again in its same state. They do say on the campaign page that it may possibly be reprinted in a future campaign, but if they do that, they'll probably do it with a different color scheme or something. So that way, if this is like the red version, maybe they'll do a purple version later. That way people could still pick it up, but it will be a slightly different version. It'll feel a little bit different, so the people who still got the original Epic Hunt, not that essential, mini expansion won't feel like they're being slighted. So you have those two pledge levels to choose from. They're both obviously pretty much an all-in. There's just that one little extra if you want to pledge at the $190 value. And this is going to be a big, epic game. And I think this is going to be one of those games that a lot of the gaming public will find after the fact. I think that also happened with Zia Legends of a Drift System. However, in that case, they did do additional Kickstarters after the fact, and so people were able to pick it up that way. And I bet something like that will happen with this as well. But in the meantime, if you want to get on board with Arydia and be able to play it from the get-go, pledge it now. It looks really good. So Arydia is aiming to deliver in December 2022. That brings us to the first of two games that are going to be funding on September 1st. The first one is called Dustbiters. Now, Dustbiters had a minimum requested funding goal of $26,000. They're currently sitting at about $76,000, so right at about 3 times their minimum requested funding. This is a 2-player game, so it is just exclusively a 2-player game. It's a very quick card game, plays in about 15 or 20 minutes. It's a light game, and I'm going to put the risk at this one on high. Now, having said that, just know that it is a card game, and it's a cheaper card game, so it's unlikely that they're going to screw this up. There's not that much to screw up. And even if they did, you're not going to be out that much because it is a cheaper card game. However, it's the first time that this entity is publishing a game and the first time that they're using Kickstarter. So what is Dustbiters? Well, it's a card game. Really, that's all it is. It's a very simple card game. But it's a card game where the two players have a convoy of cars that are trying to outrun a dust storm. And each player is going to have certain cards. Every turn, a player will draw a new card, and then they'll place a card down at the start of this convoy that's trying to outrun the dust cloud. Then they will be able to move one car in the convoy. They'll either be able to move it forward or move it back, and then they'll be able to activate the power of one of the cars. So all of the cars will have different powers. The players will be activating the powers to try to negatively affect their opponent or positively affect them. And then once they've finished their turn, the last car at the end of the convoy will be eaten and overwhelmed by the dust storm. So it is just a very simple 2-player head-to-head game where players are battling out, playing cards, and using car powers to try to stay ahead and kick their opponent's cars into the dust storm. Now, there are 2 designers on this one, but both of them are designing a board game for the first time here. However, they're not foreign to games. Both of them have worked in other kinds of games for most of their careers. The first of those is Robbie Fraser, who people probably know best from the video game Broforce. The other designer is Jan Willem Niemann, and while he has worked on other kinds of games and other media, I don't have something like Broforce that people may easily recognize, or that I easily recognize. So just know that this is also his first published board game. Now, the art on this is by Terry Velman. Again, this is Terry's first published board game. And finally, the publisher credit on this is going to the Dustbiters team, which is essentially those 3 creators. So in all 3 cases, this is their first published board game. It's also the first board game Kickstarter they're running. They are also partnering with I Am 8-Bit to do this, but it is their entity that's doing this. Now, there are 3 pledge levels on this one. For $26 and the Get the Game pledge level, you're going to get the game. If you want to pledge at the $36 pledge level for the game plus zine, you're going to get the game plus a zine that's made about the game. And then finally, at the $59 pledge level, game and merch, you're going to get the game, you're going to get the zine. You'll also get a bandana and a horse lapel pin. And this game is sitting by ready to go because they are planning on shipping this to you in November 2021. Although right now there are games that were intending on shipping in November 2021 that are pushed back months and months and months. So we'll see if they can get in there and how quickly they can deliver, but they are planning on delivering in November 2021, very shortly after this campaign is done. It may be possible because this is a card game and there aren't a lot of other components. So this is our second game here on the list that is being crowdfunded through Gamefound and not through Kickstarter. This is Lands of Galzyr. So they had a minimum required funding goal of $59,000. They are currently sitting at about $194,000, which is a little bit more than 3 times that minimum requested funding goal. This is a game for 1 to 4 players. It's going to play in about 1 to 2.5 hours. It is a medium light game for sure. There are things happening in this game that are kind of Euro-y and kind of adventure-y, but it is on the lighter side of things. And the risk on this one I'm going to put at medium high because the publisher has really only published their Dale of Merchants games. I'll talk a little bit more about that when I get to the publisher in this entry. But Lands of Galzyr actually reminds me a lot of Earthborn Rangers, which is a game that we talked about a couple weeks ago. So this is a co-op adventure game. It's very story-driven and it's focused on quests. So I don't think this is the same kind of game that we're often used to playing where we're, playing against each other and there's a point system and there's a definitive beginning and an end. This is much more story-focused. And Earthborn Rangers was the same way, if you kind of followed that campaign, where you could go out and you could do things and you could explore, and at some point you could just decide to pack up the game and you could save it. And then later on you'd take it back out and you'd continue doing things, exploring and going around the world and going on adventures and completing quests and things. But there wasn't that really kind of, this is a game and we finished the game and now we're playing the next game. It's more of a open world co-op system that allows you to explore it. Now there are 2 designers on this game. The first is Sammy Laxo, and he has previously published Dale of Merchants, Dale of Merchants 2, and Dale of Merchants Collection. He's also designed Dale of Merchants 3, but if a designer has less than 3 games in the top BGG 1000, I just keep my list to 3 games. So the 3 of his games that are rated the highest on BGG are Dale of Merchants 2, and the Dale of Merchants Collection. The other designer is Seppo Kukasjärvi, and this is going to be Seppo's first published game. Now there are 2 artists on this game. The first artist is Jesus Delgado, and he previously has worked on Dale of Merchants 3. The other artist is Sammy Laxo, and he has previously worked on Dale of Merchants 2, and Petrichor, in a big surprise. So he's also lended his art talent to Petrichor. And finally, the game is being published by Snowdale Design, which is Sammy Laxo's company. And so they have published Dale of Merchants 2, and Dale of Merchants Collection. So this game is going a different route than Arydia, the paths we fear to tread. That game, if you remember, I just finished talking about it a few minutes ago, but they had everything in the base game, and then they just added on this little kind of inconsequential expansion for people who just wanted to throw the designers a little bit extra money and get a little something extra that's not that important. In this case, they're going smaller for the base game, and then their deluxe is adding in a bunch of stuff. So if you just want the base game for this, it's $82. You're going to pledge the base game pledge. If you want to bling it out and get all of the extra stuff, everything's going to be included in one all-encompassing pledge level. That's the $153 pledge level called Lands of Galzyr Deluxe Edition. What will that add on, you ask? Well, it's going to add on some extra dice if everyone doesn't want to be using the same dice pool. If you have people sitting around the table and you want an extra set of dice. Also a dice tray. An adventure journal for you to kind of keep track of what you're doing in the game. Sleeves for all of the cards. A neoprene playmat and a playmat bag to carry around the playmat inside. And a downloadable soundtrack. You can also add on those things as add-ons if you only want some of them. But this is one of those situations where everything is much more expensive than getting it all together. So I think all of those add-ons together are about $115. So if you added them all onto the base pledge, you'd be over $200 total, $115 added to 80 something. So obviously that $153 pledge level, that's going to save you more than $50. So if you only want one or two of those extras, you're still good, I'm sure. You can go and just add those on to the base pledge and you'll be fine. But if it's a situation where you're wanting most of the things, except for maybe one or two, it's still going to be cheaper just to get the deluxe and get everything. And finally, Lands of Galzyr is looking to deliver in July of 2022. Then on September 2nd, Flamecraft completes their funding. Now, Flamecraft only had a minimum required funding goal of $25,000. And they're sitting at $1.3 million. That's 52 times their minimum requested funding goal. Now here's the thing, this campaign is being run by Peter Vaughan. He is in charge of Cardboard Alchemy, which is the publisher. He used to work for Breaking Games. He no longer does, but he was the guy who ran the campaign for Dwellings of Eldervale. And that was a huge, huge success. Now, Flamecraft is nothing like Dwellings of Eldervale in terms of the type of game that it is, but it's still getting the same kind of attention from Peter Vaughan that Dwellings of Eldervale did in terms of the attention to detail in this campaign, if you look at the Kickstarter itself. I think it's one of the best run Kickstarters out there right now, and in a long time. And Peter Vaughan really, really knows what he's doing. And I think that's a lot of the reason that this campaign has just shot to $1.3 million from a game that only needed $25,000 to fund. And I'll talk about this a little bit more when we talk about the publisher in that section. Flamecraft is designed for 1 to 5 players. It's going to be a medium-light game, and I'm putting the risk level on this one at medium-low, and that really is because of Peter Vaughan. Because here's the thing, whenever a company just starts and they're doing the first Kickstarter, the risk is always high because they're doing it for the first time, they haven't done it before. Even if you've published games, but you just haven't used Kickstarter, there's always new things that are going to come up that you don't have experience with, new challenges specific to Kickstarter. But as I mentioned before, Cardboard Alchemy is Peter Vaughan's company. And they've only done, this is their 3rd Kickstarter. So the first Kickstarter they ran was right after Peter left Breaking Games after Dwellings of Eldervale had finished delivering. He left Breaking Games because it's actually owned and run by someone else. So he was kind of doing all of the heavy lifting there and running everything. And I think he felt the need to go out on his own where he could kind of control more of what he was actually putting all this work into and producing. So he started Cardboard Alchemy, but their very first Kickstarter was just for like gaming accessories. And I think that was a smart move because it helped them do a Kickstarter quickly, get one that was fulfilled and done well, just on their resume right out of the bat. And it also got them some operating capital. And then they kickstarted a smaller game called Mission Catastrophe. And then finally, this is their first big game. I say big game even though it's a lighter game. It's not necessarily big in terms of this overwhelming thing, but it does have a nice large footprint on the table. It has a great art and just lots going on, lots of beautiful stuff. This is a game people are going to see on the table, much like Dwellings of Eldervale, and it's going to generate a lot of interest in the gaming community. So this is a game that's themed around dragons, baking bread and cooking, dragons working in restaurants. Very cute, very appealing. Mechanically, at its core, it's a worker placement game that has things like hand management and players fulfilling contracts. So the designer on this is Manny Vega. Manny Vega previously designed Sparkle Kitty and Sparkle Kitty Knights. And those are two games that really helped put breaking games on the map. So when they did the Kickstarters for those two Sparkle Kitty games, they were done with Peter and through Breaking Games. So I just think it's interesting that Peter has kind of gone back to Manny as one of the first campaigns and the first big campaign for his new company. So they're kind of working together and they're trying to create a lightning strike twice for the second time with this. And by God, they've done it. I mean, they're already sitting at 1.3 million on a game that shouldn't be astronomical to produce. Now, the artist on this is Sandara Tang, and she's previously worked on Descent, Journeys in the Dark, Legacy of Dragonholt, and The Lord of the Rings, the card game, but she also happened to work on Sparkle Kitty Knights. So she's part of the family. And then finally, this game is being published by Cardboard Alchemy, which I've mentioned is Peter Vaughn's company. This is really their first published game. They do have Mission Catastrophe. They've already finished a Kickstarter for that, so it's in the pipeline, but it hasn't actually published or been delivered yet. Now, this is going to have a similar kind of pledge level as Lands of Galzyr, where there's going to be two pledge levels, one that's a base game and one that's a deluxe version that kind of adds in everything else. And then you can get the add-ons separately if you just want to add one or two of them to the base. So the pledge for the base game is $39. It's called Shopkeeper, and that is the standard edition of the game. So it's going to come with the kind of components that you normally get in standard versions. A lot of cardboard tokens, cardboard money, cardboard resources, that kind of stuff. If you want the deluxe edition, you're going to want to pledge at the $79 level. That is the Flamekeeper pledge, and that will add the following things into your pledge. Metal coins, wooden resources. So both of those things will replace the cardboard resources and the cardboard money. 6 full color miniatures. So again, we're getting, I don't think pre-painted miniatures because they're not going to be painted, but they will be colored, which I like that. So you're going to get miniatures in with the deluxe version. They don't come with the standard edition. And you'll also get a game tray system that will include 2 of the Y trays. So Peter really likes physical productions. He did a great job with Dwellings of Eldervale, and there's a great game tray system for that. They're going to be doing another game tray system in here. And then finally, this version, the deluxe version, will be a limited print run. So just as with Dwellings of Eldervale, there were some components and some things that you could get in the Kickstarter that people are later not really finding or having a hard time finding at retail because they're not meant for retail. So again, with this one, you're going to be able to find that standard version at retail, but the other components, probably not, because the deluxe is a limited Kickstarter only print run. But as I mentioned, also as with Lands of Galzyr, if you want some of those extras, you can get them as add-ons. Just know that if you were to add up the prices of all the add-ons, it's going to be about $60, which if you were to add that price onto the $39 standard edition, you're sitting at $99, which is $20 more than the deluxe pledge. So in the Flamekeeper pledge, you are getting a further discount on all of the extras. So if you only wanted to get 1 or 2 of the extras and get the standard edition, that's probably cool. But if you want pretty much all of the extras except for 1 or 2 things, it's still going to make better sense for you probably just to get the deluxe version and get everything. And finally, Flamecraft is shooting to deliver in July of 2022. Now that brings us to the last game on today's list. This is Wicked and Wise, and this will also fund on September 2nd. Now, they had a minimum required funding goal of $10,000. They're currently sitting at about $27,000, so that's over 2.5 times their minimum required funding goal. Now, this is a game for 2 to 6 players. It's supposed to play in about 45 to 60 minutes. It's a light game. It's essentially just a card game. It's a trick-taking game, so mechanically it's fairly light. And I'd put the risk on this one at medium-high. The publisher has published a few things before, but nothing really huge. So they have some experience with Kickstarter, but they don't have enormous runaway successes that they've dealt with on Kickstarter. I mentioned this is a card game. It's a trick-taking game. It's themed around dragons and mice. So really you're going to want to play this game with either 4 or 6 players, I think. But there are options for other things. But it's designed to be played in pairs, and it plays up to 6. And so when you're playing it in pairs, one player in each pair is going to be a dragon character and one's going to be a mouse during a trick-taking round. And so the tricks will start with the different dragon players, each leading cards. And then the mice players will play their cards. And they're not necessarily trying to win the trick, the mice. They're playing cards that will add in little abilities and things that will affect the other cards and the cards that are being played and kind of what's happening. And to me, that's what makes this game interesting, because they're essentially taking like a card trick-taking game, but they're making it a little bit more gamery in the way that they're using these mice cards. So those 2 mice players, or 3 mice players if you're playing with 6 players and 3 teams of 2, the mice players will play their little cards, and then the dragon players will get to play another card, and then the trick will end. So 4 or 6 players, you're going to be playing with teams of 2. If you're playing a 2 or 3 player game, you're going to be playing as if each person was their own team. So each player will be a dragon character and a mouse player. And I know for me, the game may play okay at those 2 and 3 player counts, but I think it's designed to play in teams. I mean, it's a trick-taking game. So I'm not sure if I'm going to back this game, but if I did back it, or if I play it in the future, I definitely personally will want to be playing at the 4 or 6 player count. But it does play at 2 or 3, so just know that you can do that. If you get the game, you won't only be able to play it at 4 and above. Now, this game is designed by Fertessa Elise. She has another game in the pipeline. It's called Book of Villains. It's supposed to be published this year. It hasn't come out yet. So this won't be her first published game. It'll probably be second after Book of Villains. And then there are 3 artists that are being credited on this game. The first is Jay Bell. He, like Fertessa, has another game that's supposed to hit later this year in 2021. That game is Spotlight. For Estefania Rodriguez, this is her first published game. And then the third artist on this is Beth Sobel, and she's done a lot of stuff. You may know her from games like Arboretum, Calico, Viticulture Essential Edition, and Wingspan. And then finally, Wicked and Wise is being published by Weird Giraffe Games. They've previously published Dreams of Tomorrow, Fire in the Library, and Tumbletown. Now, there's only 2 pledge levels on this one. If you just want the game, $25, Wicked and Wise. You get the game. There are a couple other pledge levels that have to do with a print and play, but I never talk about print and plays. But for a physical copy of the game, the lowest pledge level that you're going to want is the $25 one. If you want a playmat with it, you want the $45 pledge level. It's called Wicked and Wise with Playmat. That'll get you the game with the playmat. And then finally, Wicked and Wise is shooting to deliver in July of 2022. Okay, so that wraps up this section. That is all of the games that are funding during this period that I'm personally kind of recommending to you guys. That brings us to the pledge section. So of the games that I talked about last week, there were actually 4. I pledged 3. I pledged Almanac Crystal Peaks. That looks like a really kind of fun adventure and exploration game. It plays kind of over a booklet. It's a worker placement game. I've heard good things about the first game, The Dragon Road. I haven't played it yet. This is my chance, I think, to pick up the newest game along with the first game, and I personally am looking forward to playing it. But I also think it's something that we'll be able to play on the Twitch channel. We'll be launching hopefully by the end of the year, and I think it'll be great for that. And I also think it's a game that my fiance Kristen's really going to like. So I pledged that one. I did the all-in. I got everything. I also pledged for Excavation Earth. It belongs in a museum. And Excavation Earth, the base game, that's delivered this year. I backed it the first time around. It is currently sitting at number 5 on my best games of 2021 list. So I really like it. It's my favorite Euro so far this year after Kanban EV, so my second favorite. And I think it's a really good game. I really like Excavation Earth. So Backing this latest expansion was just a no-brainer for me. It's also doesn't break the bank because I already have all of the previous stuff, so it was just a smaller pledge level for me to pick up the newest stuff, like $45 probably. And then finally, I backed the new Edge of Darkness expansion, Emissaries of the Vale. And that is a game that I have still yet to get to the table. So I haven't played it yet, but I already have all the other stuff for it. I think it's a game that I'm going to like. So at this point, I'm just continuing to get all the stuff for it. I do need to get it to the table soon to make a decision, because if it's not for me, I need to stop acquiring things for it and sell it off. But I think it will be a keeper, and so I have pledged for the latest expansion, and I'm looking forward to getting that one too. But those are the 3 games that I personally pledged this period that I featured in the previous video. And that brings me to new acquisitions. So there's only one game that I've acquired since the previous video. It actually just arrived today, shortly before I started shooting this, and that is Glen 2 Highland games. That's another game I still haven't played the base game yet, but I do have it. I've heard great things about it. I think it's going to be another game that my fiance is really going to like. It's basically a tile placement game, and it uses kind of like a rondel around the middle where you're going and selecting tiles. I know the original Glen came out in 2010. I've never played it. I've never even seen it. I don't know how available it is or it was, but from where I'm sitting, I think that original Glen was a lower printing, and I don't think it was that available, but I think it was highly regarded. And so a couple of years ago, they decided to do a big new version. They just called it Glen 2. So they decided we're just going to make a new game. But I think it's the original Glen just kind of pumped up with a lot more stuff. And so its reputation preceded it. I'd heard really good things about it. I decided to jump on with the big, I don't want to say overproduced sequel, but like well-produced sequel. And I've still continued to hear good things about it. I just haven't had a chance to get it to the table yet. But I'm very much looking forward to it. And now that the new expansion has come, maybe that's something I can kind of get to soon. However, I do have a lot of games I'm trying to still get through, both for first impressions videos and so that I can complete my best games of 2020 list. And there are a lot of games kind of in the pipeline for that I need to get through first. So that's kind of where my attention is going to be focused on the immediate future. In fact, since there are no played games this period, let's just go right to the what's coming section. And let me tell you a little bit about that. Okay, so the timer on my top 25 games of 2020, I still have 17 games from 2020 that I'm continuing to play. I'm probably going to get about 3 to 4 of those played a week. And then as soon as the requisite number of weeks go by, I should be publishing that list. Now you won't see first impressions on those. You won't see first impressions on those games. I'm not trying to kind of backload all of those games. However, eventually I will be doing teaches and reviews on a lot of those games, but I'm not trying to get any of those games produced before I get my top 25 of 2020 out. In the meantime, I'm also working on some backlogged first impressions going back earlier in the year. So I'm working on this video right now, obviously, as I'm shooting it. I did get my Kanban EV first impressions video out this week. It was very long for a first impressions video. I finished shooting my first impressions video for Imperium Legends, and that hopefully will be a lot shorter. That's the intention. And I'm actually planning on editing that tonight and getting it posted, and then editing this tomorrow. So if everything gets done as it should, this video will be premiering on Friday, and the Imperium Legends first impressions video will already be up. And then over the weekend, you will see my July Games of the Month video land. And then over the weekend, I'll be working on my Kemet Blood and Sand first impressions video, which should hit over the weekend or early next week. That all means that next week, the 3 first impressions videos you'll probably get from me will be for Embarcadero, and then Import-Export, and then Shawson. The following week, we'll see first impressions videos for Hadrian's Wall and the new Stronghold Undead game, which kind of combined the two previous versions into one. And then I'm not sure after that. It could be Coffee Traders, it could be Oath, Chronicles of Empire and Exile, but before I put out an Oath video, I want to make sure I've had enough time with that game, playing it over, if not a full campaign, a series of games, just so I can kind of see how that game evolves over time. But that is kind of what's in the wings now and what's coming soon. And as I mentioned, after I get through the 17 remaining games from 2020, you will see a top 25 of 2020 list from me. I know that the latest Pandemic Legacy will not be on that list. There may be one or two other caveated games that I won't be including on that list, but it's going to be a rather extensive, rather thorough list, and I have played a lot of 2020 stuff. I'm trying to do it as thoroughly as possible. Now, once I get to my top games for 2021 next year, it won't come out anywhere near as late because I have been playing a lot more 2021 games over the course of the year. Whereas with 2020, I missed a lot of stuff because of the pandemic, and I'm playing catch up a lot right now. Anyway, that's what's coming. And now I'm going. But before I do, I would like to thank you very much for watching the video. I hope it helped you make some Kickstarter decisions. And if you've made it all the way through this video, please consider liking. And if you're new to the channel and you haven't subscribed before, please consider doing that. That's really the best way to help me continue producing content and grow the channel and be able to produce better content in the future. And finally, if you want to be notified whenever I publish videos in the future, you can also hit the alarm bell once you're subscribed. I think people are rediscovering how cathartic and restorative playing games with other people is, and just having that social element. So find ways to do that safely. Thank you once again. Take care. Have a great weekend. Get in as much good gaming as you can, and I will see you in my next videos.